I'm Joanne Sutphin. I am on the committee with the Alexander Black House and Cultural Center, and we are having a chat today with Barbara Phlegar. And Barbara is going to tell us about a long-time business that was in Blacksburg, Dickerson's Jewelry. She was very much a part of it all of her life. Barbara, I want to start out asking you about your connection with Dickerson Jewelry. I think it was an uncle.
That's right. It's my uncle, Robert Dickerson, Bob Dickerson, and he grew up in Blacksburg. They probably came here, I think he was about 7. Anyway, he started working for McElrath Jewelry, and I think this was after school, and he would fire the furnace. And McElrath Jewelry was on Main Street, up above where the post office, the old post office is, and he fired the furnace, is my understanding, as a kid. And so then he, and Mr. McElrath was a watchmaker or a watch repairman, and Bob served as an apprentice for Mr. McElrath. And then Mr. McElrath moved back, or moved to Parisburg, or maybe Narrows. I'm not absolutely sure. And I think Bob did travel over there and work with him for a while. But in 1948, he opened his own business, which would be now on Draper Road. And at that time, that was just, you turn from College Avenue onto Draper, and it was just an alley. It was not a road at that time, just a dirt alley. Tiny little space in the wall as a watch repairman, and he sold watches, and that was in 1948. And then in around 50 or 51, I can't remember, he was called back. He had been in the Navy, and he was called back reserves in the service during the Korean War. So the store was closed less than 2 years, but I can't remember exactly how long. And then he came back. Then in 1960, he moved around the corner where Mary Ava's gift shop had previously been, and they moved on up the street on College Avenue. And so Bob took the place there, still watch repairman, but then did go into jewelry retail and that type
And
of
when
thing.
you said it was on College Avenue where Mary Ava's had been, it was on the corner of College and what is now Draper, so it was where Gillies is.
That's right.
Part of where Gillies
That's right.
is. It was
That's right.
smaller.
Part of it. It was smaller than that.
Okay, and then at some point you got involved with Dickerson's.
In 1959, my uncle said, I need you to help me until I can find someone.
Right.
And so I worked after school and on Saturdays and during holidays, and 30 years later, he still hadn't found anyone, and he retired in 90.
In 1990, and the store closed.
The store did close then.
Yeah, and so you retired from that
That's
business.
Right, that's right. So
but
we just went out together.
I know that you continue to have an effect with your skills. I know that you are the one who engraved all of the plaques that are on the seats here at the Lyric.
Yes. When we closed the jewelry store, I did take the jewelry, the engraving machine home with me, and I did a few things on the side.
Yeah.
Actually, I believe then I had it in the garage, but now I do have a little bit better place.
And so you're still engraving?
Oh, on occasion.
On occasion.
Not very much.
But for anybody that goes to the Lyric, if they look at the little plaques on each of the seats, they'll know now who did all of that good work.
That's right.
Yeah, and maybe it'll make people look at them more.
Sure.
More.
There's some neat names, folks on there that are part of this community and have been, and people that the Lyric Theater is very important to.
Right.
And that the town's important.
And it was the support
yes.
that everybody showed at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now let's talk. Before we get off of Dickerson's Jewelry, tell me more. It was a small store, but you were very busy. I know.
Well, this is just the local mom pop store, and you know, the thing that we offered that your independents offered a service. And if you didn't have in stock what they wanted or needed, you know, you ordered it. Which is and that small town, you know, you knew most of your customers. Very, very special. I think, you know, it's harder to compete now, that independent mom and pop stores, but they did have that to offer, is the service and the look after their customers.
Well, I know your clientele also included Virginia Tech students and VPI students then. Yeah, I remember seeing them go in and out with their uniforms on.
That's right, and before Christmas, it wasn't unusual at all. I mean, when you ordered, you kind of catered to their price range. You know, students were certainly a part of the business, but they didn't have a lot of money to spend. A student, very, very little. So you really did cater. You tried to, you know, merchandise that they would be able to take home. So.
Well, and I remember going in there and seeing Bob come out from the back with the his jewelry on his forehead, because he would be in the back working.
Often
or you
he
too.
would go up the street and forget to take off his eyeglass, and
So he was quite a repairman. I'm sure that kept him busy.
Yeah, sure. Actually, you know, that was when watches were repaired. This is a throwaway society on watches now, but that was before the quartz watches and all that. So yeah, there was a repair that
was probably the biggest
that
part
watch
of it.
Needed to be cleaned and those type of things, crystals, and it was a different world.
Now, do I remember a bell or something when the door opened, the main door? Was there some kind
That's
of a...
possible.
Well, now, and then after that, a little bit more about you. After that, you went on to work, after your 30 years at Dickerson's, I think you did something else as a profession.
No. Well, I did still worked in retail a little bit, and I would fill in at Smithman's in Christiansburg, and yeah, and now keeping with the jewelry thing that I love, the jewelry business, is I work for Balfour college ring sales. Now, at that time, it was art carve ring sales, and I had sold art carve wedding bands and diamond engagement rings. But then there was another division that had class rings for college, and so I worked for them for a while, and so worked at Tech. And then we traveled a little bit, JMU and VMI and a few places like that. But now Balfour, which is a college ring, high school and college ring company, bought out the class ring business from Art Carve, and so I still keep my finger in a little bit and work when they're at Tech.
Okay.
Look, it's fun.
I remember seeing you in the over there
when
it was ring time,
yes, right.
Class ring time. Well, and so let's go up the street on College Avenue from Dickerson's going towards the Lyric.
Right.
Dickerson's Jewelry.
Right, and then right beside was Carver's.
Oh.
And they sold stereo, high fives, records, that type
Bill
of things.
Carver.
Bill Carver.
And
Bill
his
and
wife.
Trudy Carver.
Yes.
And that was a mom and pop store again.
Right, and you could go in and go through the 40, or it was actually the 33s.
Right, right.
And pick out records that you wanted.
Right.
That's right. Okay, and then what?
And then from there was Mary Ava's. And you know, I do not remember what had been there before Mary Ava moved there, but that was a beautiful store there, and they carried gifts of all sorts.
Mary Ava's gift shop.
Mary Ava's gift shop, and china, crystal.
And Mary Ava was usually there.
Yes.
And her last name was Kessler, I think.
That's right. And then her brother, Jacob Kessler, also worked there with her. And then from there, I think you went to the clothing store that was May Hunter.
Mrs. Hunter's dress shop.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Which later, I believe, John Norman's was in that location. later on.
And then the Lyric Shop,
Yes,
I guess.
the Lyric and the Lyric Shop, and then the right
theater.
beside the Lyric Theater. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then after you went past the Lyric, you could go into...
I believe that's where John Norman's was, on the upper side of the Lyric.
Right.
But I can't remember what it was before then. Oh, it was the Five and Dime.
The Five and Dime was past the Lyric.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Above there.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
remember, you could go in on Main and you could come out on College Avenue on the
Right.
5 and 10 cent store.
Rose's Five and Dime.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and then can you tell me more then on Main Street after you've come out of the Five and Dime and you're going up,
Right, and then right into your Gift and Hardware.
but before that,
Well, see, was the drugstore still there? Corner Drug. When the Rose's Five and Dime was
right,
there.
and then Brown's Hardware before it was Ridinger's, as I remember.
Oh, okay. You're older than I am. No, just kidding. I didn't remember the Brown.
Yeah.
I do remember there was a Brown's Hardware, but I thought they were somewhere
No, I
else.
think Ridinger then had Brown's Hardware. And then the next shop
Of
up
course,
was...
the college, is it the College Inn?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
oh,
and
yes.
Mrs. Was in there. Mrs. Smith, and her
And her
son-in-law
Bauer.
and daughter,
Was it Bauer?
Bowers, the son-in-law and daughter,
Yes.
ran the College Inn, and you could go in. There were booths
Right.
and a counter,
a
with
counter
stools.
with stools. That's right. Which was there a long time, actually. And then a barber shop.
Okay,
Wasn't there?
and who was the barber?
I cannot tell
Mr.
you on
Whitaker
there.
was one of them.
There was a Hassel Price that was a barber, and he could have been there, but I know later on he was on up the street a little. So I'm not sure on that, but yeah, that was a barber shop.
Okay,
And
you were
then-
downtown a lot, so I'm thinking.
And
you
then
were-
a tech drugstore
Right.
was following
yes,
that. And then there was an A&P at one time, a
that was
grocery
across
store.
the street.
Well, that was right up above the tech. A&P was across the street. That was Mickermack. You remember Mickermack? That was right on the corner above.
Yes. All right, we're still on this side of Main
That's
Street,
right.
and then the old hotel,
Yes, was in the next block.
Colonial Hotel, and then there was a another record shop.
I think there
That
was.
was later.
I think there was a record shop
Later.
up there later. Way back, there had been a little Piggly Wiggly.
That's what
in
I was
there.
going to say, Piggly Wiggly. 'Cause
Which really, my father-in-law, my first father-in-law, the Gates, started that Piggly Wiggly on there. It was just a very small store, and they cut their own meat and that type of thing.
and his name was,
Howard Gates.
Howard Gates.
Priest Gates.
and you were married
To
to
his son, Jeff.
Jeff, yes. And then there was a later business, and we'll talk about that once we've finished going
Right.
up the street. But so after the Piggly Wiggly was the another Black and Logan.
Black and Logan.
Black and Logan, which was a department
Store. And you could go in Black and Logan from Maine
Yes.
and come out on Roanoke Street.
Right. Yeah, and
Turned around, yeah.
and then beside Black and Logan there was another.
Was there a
drugstore?
florist?
I remember a florist
Florist
across the street.
somewhere. There was a florist, roller florist across the street, but there was one on the corner, but that may have been later. Name won't quite come to me. Helen, I want to say Helen's Florist, but that may not be right.
Yeah. Well, then across the street, now we'll go across the street to the old National Bank building, which is still standing,
Right.
and you can see the name on the building still. And then coming down that side of the street, there was a florist there, and I remember you went up steps to get to it. I don't know the name of that.
I don't either.
Yeah.
See, I thought the florist was on the opposite corner. There was an appliance store there, but there was a rollers floor. Wasn't there a rollers florist?
That was where National Bank is now,
Okay.
basically. Yeah.
So that was on that end, okay.
Uh-huh.
And then I was thinking there was a hardware store that you went up the steps at one time there.
Okay, could
But
be.
But how about Louise's dress shop?
All right, tell about that.
Where did that come in there?
It was where that little hair salon is now.
And maybe where there's an art gallery there.
Yes,
in
in that area.
And that was Louise Watkins. That was somebody that the local mom pop store. It was a wonderful store.
And Mary Mills worked in there.
Yes, I remember Mary. Loved Mary.
Yes, Mary was in there, but it was a very narrow, deep little shop.
I can tell you an interesting thing. You know, I was a kid in high school, and so I would go on my lunch hour, I'd go to Louise's dress shop. And I had an account there, thank you. Opened my first account at Louise's dress shop. And they were just, again, that was, you know, you wrote it on the books.
Well, of course, she knew where she could find your mom and dad if you didn't pay up. So, because the Apshers have been here for quite a long time.
Really a fun thing, yeah. And then when she was there, I think then the dress shop, well, a hair shop, beauty salon, but I can't remember. No, I believe that was an insurance company before it was a hair salon, right beside her, wasn't it, before they got to the post office?
Yeah, could have been.
Who knows?
Yeah, I know. Where
are those pictures that we should have taken?
And then the post office.
Yes.
All right. And then do you remember across the street from the post office, across Jackson? At one time, it was an old hotel.
Yeah, I do remember that.
Dr. Roop's hotel. And I remember seeing him sit out on the porch.
That's right.
And there were actually the things that you would tie horses to still there when we were kids. Yeah.
Yeah, I do remember that.
And then next on down, that's where the bank is now, where Dr. Roop's hotel was.
And then the A&P.
Yes. Okay. Tell about the A&P.
Well, I mean, there's this the grocery store, but I'm really a little. Is that where the bank is now?
It was more where that drive-in for the bank is.
Yes.
And,
yes.
I don't know who started the A&P there, but I remember Johnny Cole
was the manager.
Was the manager and employed a lot of local boys.
Yes, that's right.
To help him run the place.
That's right.
Yeah.
The local boys, the bag, and a lot of the cashiers were local ladies. And then the ladies were the ones that ran the cash registers. Yeah.
And then at some point, Hummel's Jewelry was.
They were. Now was the drugstore next. Center Drug.
Center Drug.
And
then Hummel's, I guess.
And then Hummel's Jewelry, and Algebright's
clothing shop. Yeah.
Again, all the local. Let's see, what is the name of that Center Drug?
Kirkman.
Family Kirkman.
Yeah, we're going to have Ed
wonderful.
come and do a chat. He's because he grew up in Center Drug basically, because his parents were both there running it.
That's right.
Yeah. All right, Barbara. Now let's go back to Howard Gates, because I know later after Piggly Wiggly.
Right. Howard Gates, and then so he was a businessman, and he then went out on South Main and built a building, and that was Gates Furniture. And I guess now that is
Annie Case.
Annie Case, and then the little children's shop right beside that in Annie's Case. And that, let's see, that store closed, let me see, Mr. Gates died in 72 and 73, and it continued on. So there was a furniture store run by someone else after Gates, before it was Annie Case.
Did Jeff run that at all?
Jeff was in there, he sure was, until he sold out, sure.
And the Gates, I remember, lived across, well, right where the farmer's market is.
That's right. Actually, the town bought that from the Gates. The Gates originally lived on Airport Acres, that road, Airport Road. And then they bought that property in downtown in 60, I believe it was about 1960. And then the town bought that from where the farmer's market is and tore that house down.
But there were houses there. Describe that.
Oh, it was a big brick house with a porch all across the
porch.
front.
And there was more than one house.
There was. Then beside that, there was a 2-story white frame house that they rented. Yeah, had the. That's right. I'd forgotten about that. Yes.
And did the Sylvies live next door? Or
that was a relative, but they did not ever live there.
okay. So right there where the farmers market is now, and then it just began Black and Logan, I think, right after.
That's right. That's right.
So we're back on that corner, and then behind where the Gates house was, he developed.
Was the Tech Motel, and he's the one that built that and ran that. I'd forgotten he owned the Tech Motel, and I think they worked that for a while. But he had a manager that managed that for him. I can actually remember hearing Mrs. Gates saying that she would. I mean, maybe she'd go over there and work in the office, and then bring glasses and things to wash in her dishwasher at night. So they did work it.
So now, if you look at that building now from the front, you can tell that it had been an old motel. Yeah,
and the one that's there separate, that's John's Camera. I don't know if that's John Camera.
No,
now.
it's a pizza.
Okay.
It's pizza now.
That was the office.
Okay,
for the
all
Tech
right. Well, that
Motel.
explains that small building.
Yes, that was the
on
office
that
for the
lot.
Tech Motel.
And that was probably one of the only motels in town.
It probably was, really,
Yeah.
or early on, because outside of town, out on South Main, there was the Hardee's
Yeah.
Motel.
So right in town, you could walk. If somebody had to visit
right.
Tech, they could
was
park
good.
there and then walk.
Yeah,
So we've covered that block really well.
We have.
Yeah, and then so Jackson Street. So we're coming back towards Dickerson's now, or Gillies. So right across Jackson Street, there's a parking deck, and with a building underneath it. Now it's been that way for quite a while. The parking deck, and then.
Oh yes, yes. Okay, I got you.
All right, and then we're going from on that end of Jackson back towards Main Street. So there's a stone building back behind there.
Don't you remember that was a doctor's office?
Yes.
And I think that was was it Woolwine?
Dr. Woolwine.
Right.
Yeah, and his nurse was Nellie Linkus.
Yeah.
And Dr. Woolwine made house calls.
That's right. He sure did.
He would come anytime you needed him, and he would have his little black bag.
That's right.
And then beside there, that was there were 2 little offices there, and there was an insurance company. Moss.
Yes.
Was.
I'd forgotten the Mosses.
The Mosses. Yeah.
Moss Insurance. Well, now where was Dr. Phlegar's office?
I remember Dr. Phlegar's office over on the corner of Jackson and Church, across from the Episcopal Church.
Yes, I think that's right. And his nurse was Evelyn White.
And Dr.
He made house calls too.
Yeah, and Dr. Phlegar and Dr. Mangus were together.
Oh, that's right. Okay, that's right. Dr. Mangus was, yes, Dr. Mangus.
Oh, and Dr. Lucas. Dr. Lucas was in there at one point with Dr. Phlegar. So maybe I've got
Mangus may have been at a different spot.
Yeah. And that was right across from what's now the old town hall.
Right.
And we did a chat with Ken Phipps. And of course, he was a state trooper and was in and out of that building when it was town hall and it was a jail.
Oh, right. I do remember that being a jail, vaguely.
All right, now I bet you got your driver's license.
I did.
Okay, let's talk about that.
That would come to town once a week. No, was it once a week on Thursdays? I think.
Yes, I think you're right.
To get, and she'd be there, and you'd
go. A lady with red hair.
I was going to say a red-haired lady.
And we were all scared to death of her because she was.
I was very frightened.
Yes. But you would go to the town, what was then town hall, with your parents to get an application, and then once you had done the test, the book test, the class test,
driving test,
she took you out to drive.
Right.
And remember the worst part Parallel parking.
That's right. We had the parallel
So
park.
we all know how to
I believe we parallel park before we drove the rest of the way, because if you didn't pass that,
She
it
wasn't
was
going
over.
And she would take you around the block.
Yeah.
And either pass or fail you right there.
I do remember my foot shaking so bad I couldn't put on the push a clutch in.
Yeah, and you had to learn on a clutch.
That's right. And she did tell me that if I didn't learn to drive better than I was right then, that I'd never live to the ripe old age of 21.
Oh.
But she did give me my permit.
Oh, good for you, Barbara.
I've lived a lot past that.
Yeah, and then, well, yeah, I know your parents lived here for many,
Right.
many years, and your father was a businessman too.
Right. He came into it through Carpenter Lumber Company. Then he was manager of the Blacksburg Lumber Company that was owned by the Liskys, Charles Liskey. And then in 1970, my dad decided to go into business for himself. And then he had Absher's paint and lumber or hardware.
And where was that?
And that was out on North Main. Well, it's across where the National Bank branch is right now. Right beside, there's a Hess there, I believe.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that house has been torn down. Hevner's bought Daddy out, and so they have they tore the house where he was, and there's a new building there. I think they're a rental.
And your dad's name, first name?
Was Bill Absher, William J.
Okay. And he grew up down in Lester's Gate.
Well, on beyond Lester's Gate, actually probably about 10 miles out of town is where he grew up, and the home place is still there. Let's see, McDonald's Mill in that area. That's where that he grew up. He was the youngest boy of 11. He did have one younger sister, and he was the last of the family, and he was always be real sad. I'm the only one left, and I would say, well, someone has to be last.
That's right. Well, now, when he was working at the Blacksburg Lumber Company, tell me where that was.
Okay, that was, well, let's go way back. You know, there was a motor company.
That's now part of Blacksburg.
That's Blacksburg offices are there. There was behind that originally, and that was owned by my uncle Dickerson, Herman Dickerson, and George Grice owned that, and that was called Blacksburg Lumber Company, and that was a building that was there. And then when they sold out and Liskey bought it, then that's when he moved, which is where the library is now.
Right.
And that was the Blacksburg Lumber Company.
When if you, let's talk about the lumber company a little bit more. There was a loading dock, I remember, there on the side of it, and there was a train trestle.
Yes.
Okay, tell me about that.
Well, I think then there was another lumber company that was right off of Main Street. And of course, this was all, but yeah. Oh goodness, yes. The train station went right through town on that, but that's often they would get their supplies
Through the train. So the train station was right where Town Hall is.
That's right.
Town Hall.
Right. But there was a lumber company across the street from that, and that was, oh goodness, I can't remember the name of it, but that was another lumber company.
Well, now the train trestle. So the train trestle crossed right where Clay Street is. And so tell me, you remember the train trestle?
I do.
You tell me.
I do. Past over Water Street, what we call Water Street.
Yeah.
But no, that was totally torn out, I suppose.
Well, and you had to drive through it.
You
under it.
were under. And you went under the trestle. I had forgotten about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the train track just came right up towards Main Street to the station, but
I suppose it ended. I mean, they had to go back the other way, didn't they?
Yeah, they turned. They didn't turn around. They just pushed it the other
That's
way.
right.
Yeah. All right. So you're remembering some good
I
things
do,
here, Barbara.
jogging my memory.
And Water Street, which is
Water Street, and I think it had its name. I mean, that was appropriately named because I think if there was heavy rains that did flood there. I think there's some water.
there's a creek there.
Okay,
Right in front of Five Chimneys.
Yes.
And then it disappears under the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So now we're at the train station, and then we're coming back towards. We're going across Washington, and remember there was a filling station, and that was
the Esso station.
right. But who was that?
Well, Rosser Smith.
Right.
And my uncle.
I thought so. I thought it was an Absher.
Creed Absher. They were in the business together, and then I believe Creed Absher bought Rosser out and ran that.
So it was Absher's. I remember.
And that was Esso. Esso station. Yes, that's right.
Right. So these are your father's brothers that you're
right.
speaking. Creed, Absher,
Creed is
and
Dad's brother.
and then the one at the lumber company was.
Well, he worked for, actually, that was his uncle-in-law.
Oh.
The Dickerson was my mother's.
Okay, gotcha. It wasn't an Absher.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So then there was the Esso station. Then we're right there at the Alexander Black House.
Oh, yes, sure, sure. And then, of course, how I remember that is the funeral home.
It was a funeral home, and Paul Oakey had it.
Oakey's funeral. Yeah.
Oakey's funeral home, and then the Hoys
Hoy.
bought it.
Yep,
And then the
Hoy.
McCoys. So it was Hoy McCoy for a while.
Right. Now just McCoy.
Yeah, so it was a beautiful old structure,
Yes.
and you've seen it recently,
Sure.
the work that's being done on it. Okay, we keep going back down the street now.
Okay, so then we go on down. And then and I don't know when that got, but there was another service station.
A golf.
And there was a golf. And I do not know who had that. But I had another cousin that did eventually buy that and ran that. Probably till its end.
And what was that name?
And J.C. Absher.
Oh, sure.
And that was Creed's son.
All right.
On that. But I can't remember when that closed. But what's there now?
Kent Square.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
That took the whole block, didn't
Yeah.
it? Yeah. Okay.
And then across the street from that, across Lee, was...
Then when I think of Kroger.
Yeah,
But
there was a Kroger
But
right
what was
there.
there before Kroger? Because I almost can remember that not being Kroger, but
Well, now Dr. Boatwright had
oh yes, sure,
an office.
That was a house.
It was a house, but it was on the more where the driveway for NBB is. A little closer to NBB. So
But-
I don't know what was before Kroger.
Well, that might. I mean, that house. So you're thinking Dr. Boatwright's the house was where the National Bank is?
Up that way. And
Yeah,
I
that
don't
was.
know.
Yeah.
We'll have to ask somebody else
Yeah,
about
that's right.
that.
We did.
Yeah, and then, so the house where Dr. Boatwright had his office, and then another filling station, and that's where Roller, florist, eventually was. And John Roller was from Parisburg.
That's right.
And had gone to Tech. He was a big Tech supporter up until he died.
And even in his later years, he was a big Tech supporter.
He would go to
the games,
the basketball
and,
games.
Yes, right. I can remember.
Yeah.
that. And had a yellow something that he waved
Yeah.
at the ball game, a yellow sweater or something. Yes,
Yeah.
sure, I remember that too.
But they had a big operation in Parisburg
Right.
and wanted to branch out and come to Blacksburg. Well, we've covered Main Street fairly
We
well
did.
there.
We did.
Yeah. Can you think of anything else that you want to add?
Well, I really can't. Just saying that, growing up in a small town was just wonderful. My memory is folks that have not had that may think that would be terrible. But when you walk down the street, it's a good chance you knew most of the folks you met. You'd go into the grocery store, drugstore, wherever the business, chances are you knew that person behind the counter. And I just have special memories of that. it's nice.
Yeah, it was
small
nice.
town. And I think, of course, it's not the small town that it was when I grew up and when you grew up, but you still get the flavor of the small town, which I love.
Right. Well, Barbara, thank you for coming this afternoon.
My pleasure.
Yeah, and I think that we've covered a lot of territory, and especially your part with Dickerson's Jewelry, and it was a big part of downtown Blacksburg for many years.
Wonderful times.
Thank you, Barbara.